Good morning, friends. Welcome to our Tuesday Bible study. I'm Reverend Jack Wooten, and I want to read a passage to you from the 15th chapter of the Gospel of John. In the 15th verse, Jesus tells his disciples, "If you love me, keep my commandments." And then a little further down, in the 20th verse, "At that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. He who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him, and will manifest myself to him." And then again in the 23rd verse, "If anyone loves me, he will keep my word. My Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. He who does not love me does not keep my words, and the word which you hear is not mine, but the Father's who sent me." And may the Lord add his blessing to this reading from his word. So the question then for us as Christians becomes, who do you love? Do you love Christ? Do you love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul and all your strength? Because if you do, Jesus said, then you keep his commandments. And in spite of what you might think and in spite of what you might claim, Jesus said, if you do not keep my commandments, you don't love me. The church needs to keep Jesus' commandments. We need to be the example of all of these things that Jesus told us to be and to do to the world around us that is falling further and further into chaos, needing the church to really be authentic. You know, back years ago when I was a little boy, there was a television show, and it was called To Tell the Truth. And in that show, there would be a panel of guests, and they would ask questions to three individuals who were all three claiming to be somebody. And the challenge was for the panel to figure out which of those three persons was the real person. And they'd always start out with all three of them saying, well, I'm so-and-so, and the second one, I'm so-and-so, and the third one, I'm so-and-so. And at the end of the show, the host would always say, will the real so-and-so please stand up? Well, friends, that's what the world is saying to the church today. Will the real church please stand up? Because there are so many different groups out there claiming to be the church, claiming to be part of the church, and yet they're not keeping Jesus' commandments. They're not a reflection of who Jesus is and who Jesus calls us to be. And so if we're going to examine ourselves, Jesus said it comes down to, who do you love? And the way you can find out who you love is just simply look at your life and say, who or what am I really, truly committed to? You know, if you truly love someone, then you really commit to that person. We vow to be totally committed to them. In marriage, that's one good example. And it should be total commitment to that person. One of the reasons we have such a high divorce rate in this country today is because people just don't want to commit. They refuse to commit. They see commitment as being, restrictive. And we live in a horribly permissive society today where it seems like just anything goes. And that commitment is what Jesus requires from us. We need to ask ourselves, am I truly committed to Jesus? Do I love him? Do I love him enough that I have committed myself to the things that he told me to do and to be? Commitment also means that when we commit, we don't just commit our thoughts and our ideas or our hearts to them. We commit all of our resources also. All that we have must be at Christ's disposal. Christians have to commit everything in our lives to Jesus. And I'm reminded of an old bumper sticker that I saw years ago that I really liked. That was on the bumper sticker of a car, and it said, "If you love Jesus, tithe. Any fool can honk." And it was a play off of other popular bumper stickers that said, honk if you love Jesus. But he was challenging him, well, if you really love Jesus, then take it a step further. Act like you love him. Put your profession into action. How committed are we really to Christ and to his cause, to the building of his kingdom, to making disciples? Because we have to commit ourselves, heart, mind, soul, body, resources, and we also have to commit our time. It's so important that we realize that. We have a generation of kids who are being taught, again, that church is, just not that important. It's secondary to everything else. Parents commit themselves and overextend themselves and their children a lot of times to ball teams and bands and dance classes and soccer and there's hundreds of things that they just have to spend hours and hours of practice at, and they take them game after game after game, and they're so totally committed to that and making sure their children are part of that. And yet they don't commit to having their children in Sunday school. They don't commit to having their children in church on Sunday mornings because it's not a priority in their lives. And so it's not a priority in their children's lives either. And yet they're professing to be Christians, to be like Christ. We really need to stop and think. Who are we really committed to? Who do we really love? Who really do we commit our time and our resources and our talents and our efforts and our thoughts to? Because that's really going to determine and answer the question, are we Christ's? Are we being the true church that he calls us to be? We have to commit ourselves if we're going to be faithful, if we're going to make disciples, if we're going to build the kingdom. We really have to be committed to doing the things that Jesus has told us to do. Being involved just isn't enough. And there are a lot of people today who consider themselves to be involved in their church, but they're not totally committed to the church. Jesus said, if you love me, keep my commandments. Now that's very simple. It's very straightforward. It doesn't require a lot of discernment on our part. Gee, what was Jesus saying? What Jesus was saying was, if you love me, keep my commandments. And my commandments was that you love one another the way I have loved you, that you love your neighbor as yourself, that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, and all your strength. Those were the commands that Jesus gave us. And he said, if you keep these commandments, then you love me and you'll be committed to me. But if you don't keep these commandments, he said, then you don't love me. So make sure that you're focused on all these things that Jesus is asking from us, so that we know that the love of God is within us. That was another thing. Jesus said, if you love me, my Father loves you. And the love of God will be within us. And it increases our ability to go out and love even more and even more perfectly as we continue to grow spiritually into the disciples that Jesus has called us to be. If you really love Christ, keep his commandments. If you really love your children and your grandchildren, if you really love your neighbors, if you really love those people that Jesus died for, then offer them Christ. Show them by the example of your own life what it means to love God and to love your neighbor, what it means to be true and faithful disciples of Jesus Christ, to be the church, the body of Christ in this world today, through whom God accomplishes his work and his will. A lost and desperate generation of people is crying out, will the real church please stand up? Will the real church please step up? Will the real church please speak up and show us what it means to be God's people? How committed are you? Because that will show if you really love Christ. Sola Gracia, my friends.